feed them this garbage and expect them to say thank you. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. I know that I am. Today I'm doing something potentially controversial. I'm gonna be talking about books that were really hyped that I ended up hating. I've split these into two major categories. The first is the gatekeepers. So books that people hype up because they say you're not well read in the genre if you haven't read these key books. And then the other one is books that are just hyped because people love them or they're old favorites and they're on like the fun end of like, oh my God, I can't wait for you to read this because it was so much fun to read. So without further ado, let's get started. So first up on this list is Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. I'd read some Neil Gaiman in the past, The Ocean at the End of the Lane, and I didn't like it, which I should have seen as a sign that maybe Neil Gaiman was not for me. But no, I persevered, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna read Neverwhere because some booktubers that I liked had recommended it, and they were like, it's such a great urban fantasy. I was like, great, I don't read that much urban fantasy. Let me dip my little toes in, and I'm so sad that I did, because it follows Richard Mayhew, who's like this corporate rat. He's like at the lower end of the ladder and he's engaged to a woman that doesn't really love him. And the inciting incident is he helps this homeless woman on the street, and when he helps her out, he gets pulled into London Below, which is this parallel London that exists underneath the city, and it's a system of sewers, and there's like miscellaneous magic that's never really explained. And he goes on this quest to like save the girl that he helped on the street because they're like inexorably intertwined now. But instead of finding what he was looking for her, he finds himself. And I've just gotta say, if the whole plot is going to culminate in him finding himself, he needs to be interesting in the first place. But no, Richard Mayhew is the most vanilla, middle-aged white guy who's just like moderately insecure about himself and like stumbles around, not really doing anything interesting, surrounded by things that could be interesting, but because we're seeing it through his perspective and his perspective alone, we never talk about any of the interesting stuff. And so for me, it was just 300 pages of waiting for him to like become self-aware, and then he doesn't, and then the end is like, and then he decided to stay in London Below because he raged against the corporate machine and now he's free. So that was just a waste of time. Next up is the first Witcher book. So for those of you who don't know, you follow Geralt of Rivia, who is a witcher, which is this folkloric person who goes around killing other magical beasts in medieval Eastern Europe. Great. The Witcher series is comprised of 2 short story collections at the beginning and then followed by novels. And so in order to get into the series, you have to start by reading short stories. The short stories really just did not do it for me. I read the first book, but it was a struggle. I was reading these stories and they're mostly like thinly veiled fairy tale retellings. So you'd think that my smooth little pea brain would be able to keep up, but I was constantly confused and frustrated, and there were multiple moments when I was watching the adaptation that came out last year where I was like, oh wow, that's what was supposed to happen? Didn't get that at all. You don't have that much time in each of the short stories to get to know him or get to know the world and the constraints of the world, what's possible, what the magic is like, and what the socio-political climate is, because it's all in these little short stories. And so little nuances between the stories got lost, and so a lot of the larger themes totally didn't resonate with me, and so I was left feeling confused. So I put this book down when I was maybe 60% through, and I wasn't gonna finish it until I was and I wasn't gonna finish it, but then I was like, look, I'll give this a second shot. I'll put on the audiobook and my little brain won't have to do any more of the work. We'll be fine, right? Wrong. So wrong, because the audiobook is horrible. It's so bad. Mostly because of one specific story. If you guys saw the adaptation, you'll recognize this guy, the Deoval from the field. He appears for maybe 30 seconds in the show. In the book, he has a whole 15-page tirade where he's throwing shit at the Witcher and yelling "uk, uk, 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 uk" over and over again. How do I even begin? It's so obnoxious to listen to. And usually when I'm not enjoying an audiobook, I just ramp up the speed so I can go through it faster. But this guy faster only only made him more annoying. And so I felt like I was trapped in my own personal audiobook hell, and it was just such a nightmare. And then when I watched the adaptation and I saw him on the screen, I felt like I had PTSD. Like, this guy had scarred me. So like, definitely did not enjoy. I think the adaptation is great. Henry Cavill is delicious and I would eat ice cream off of his abs, but I will not continue reading the series. Then comes his Dark Materials. And this is going to be controversial because I know that this series is a part of people's childhoods and it's something that they hold very close to their heart. And to that I say, what the fuck were you doing reading this as a child? Because it's not a children's book. No ma'am, it was not written as a children's book. It was marketed as one, but should it ever have been? I don't think so. So it's pretty clear that I didn't read this as a child, and that's mostly just because I thought that I was being edgier than the edgy kids who were reading the banned book because it was banned, because I was like, oh, I'm so cool that I don't even care that it's banned. The reason that I ended up picking it up is because at university, I took a class all about Paradise Lost. For 10 weeks, we did a line-by-line close reading of the text. I fell in love with the world and the dissection of the Bible and religion and seeing it through this critical lens, and I had heard that his Dark Materials was a retelling of this and riffing off of John Milton's work, and I was like, I loved Milton, I'll probably love this. How wrong I was. How wrong? So Paradise Lost is a retelling of Adam and Eve's fall from Eden, and it fills in a lot of gaps and it takes a lot of creative license, let's just say that. But nowhere close to what Philip Pullman does with his Dark Materials. The first book, The Golden Compass, or in the UK, Northern Lights, is like, it's aggressively medium. You follow this headstrong young girl named Lyra. She's like 9 years old and she's like, I want to go to the North Pole. And also there's these like evil people that are snatching kids and torturing them, and I'm gonna like shut down their operation. And she like goes on this crazy adventure and does all this fun stuff, and you're like, wow, okay, this girl kind of slaps. Like, is the pacing bad? Yes. Is the like magical world kind of like not very well explained? Yeah, but I guess he'll get to that in later books, won't he? You would think, you really would think, wouldn't you? But then in the second book, Lyra meets Will, who's another young boy, and completely disintegrates. She used to be this like cool, headstrong young girl who was like fighting against like society and being whomever she wanted to be, and then she meets Will and becomes this meek, submissive little thing that's just like, oh Will, what should we do now? Oh Will, won't you tell me the way? So like the most endearing part of the series out the window. And then it starts to become clear what Philip Pullman is trying to do, which is proselytize. Pullman has very famously said that the series is about killing God, and that's exactly what he's doing. He sets up this like magistrate, which is this like evil corporation that's actually the church, which is like not thinly veiled at all. It's like, that's organized religion and they torture children and they're the worst, and there's actually only one religion, it's the bad kind, and they're all evil. Why? Because I'm telling you that they are. And if there had been any more critical thought and like explanation going into like why they were bad besides like they torture kids because I said they do, it would make sense. Then I would be like, okay, fine. But this like whole like kid torture thing is never really fully explained. And the lady who is at the helm of this kid torturing in the third book becomes one of the good guys. It's revealed that she is actually Lyra's mom, and even though she spent 2 books hunting her down and trying to kill her, now she loves her child and just wants to protect her from the horrible, horrible clutches of organized religion. And then the whole like twist of the series is that Lyra needs to be protected because she is the reincarnation of Eve. Why? No reason. And this like random lady from Oxford that they meet is the snake who's going to tempt them. How will she tempt them? She tells them stories about how she was horny as a kid, and then Lyra is like, I also am horny. She's 12. And then she and Will, another 12-year-old, run away together and have a romantic escapade, make out, and then realize we can't get into the temptation of loving each other. We need to separate forever. And then an angel comes down from heaven, explains everything to them, and then they fuck off. And then that's the end. And then Lyra just like lives her happy life, like free of temptation, because she didn't like continue to make out with her 12-year-old boyfriend. And then it's like, look at her, she can live without religion, how great. Excuse me?
what the fuck is going on in here on this day?
The intricacies of Paradise Lost are so beautifully set up for debate and discussion, and for Philip Pullman to be like, what if I had kids make out though? What if all of this is about beyond me. Beyond me. It's marketed as a children's book. It's not for kids. Just because there are children at the center doesn't mean that it's for kids. And even if it were for kids, it's boring. Like, the read is kind of a slog. It reads like a classic, it's inaccessible, it's dry, and as a kid I wouldn't have enjoyed it. So like, who's it for? It's the kind of thing where people are like, I can't wait for my kids to read it. And I'm like, why? Why? You want to put them off religion? Have a candid conversation with them about religion in the real world. Don't feed them this garbage and expect them to say thank you. And then the last like gatekeepy book is Middlegame by Seanan McGuire. This book had been hyped up to me so much, and so I caved and I splurged and I got myself a hardcover, and boy did I regret it. Middlegame follows these two twins, Roger and Dodger, who were created in an alchemical lab with the purpose of fulfilling this alchemical doctrine, which is extracted from the original Pythagorean doctrine of ethos, which says that certain musical instruments have the ability to affect our logos, our logical thinking, and pathos, our emotional thought. And this is extracted in the book to become an alchemical tenet that says that mathematics on one side and language are the two like components of like the human spirit and soul, and when together they can affect nature. And so Roger and Dodger are the human embodiments of mathematics and language. They're created in this alchemical lab, and then they're raised separately, and the story follows them as they grow up and they're trying to figure out who they are as individuals while fate keeps trying to pull them together. The alchemists who created them are continually trying to pull them apart, but also push them to fulfill their roles as the human embodiments of this alchemical doctrine. And the reason that I have a problem with this, besides the fact that it was like boring and not really my cup of tea, is because this is a really good example of character versus concept. For the people who liked it, it's mostly because the characters felt really well fleshed out to them and the character study was intriguing. But reading for concept, this was really frustrating because this magic system, or this science system rather, is built upon the original tenets of alchemy and classic Greek philosophy. And it feels like an example where as much pretentious academic jargon is thrown into the magic system as possible so that it's hard to understand, so that you don't have to question things, because it's like, oh, like of course, like philosophy, because I know that, like of course this makes sense. And the magic system ends up feeling convenient and contrived, and this is coupled with the fact that it's never properly explained. The world building is done mostly through this children's book that's spliced in between the chapters called Over the Woodward Wall, which follows these two children who are supposed to be, who I'm assuming are mirrors of Roger and Dodger, who are walking down this path that is like the yellow brick road, but notably isn't. They're walking to this city, and there's like the King of Cups and like all of these like figures who are like standing as roadblocks, and those are also supposed to be parallels to the real world, but that's never explained. And you're supposed to just be like, oh yeah, of course, because like naturally. It feels like this is a really good example of elitism in the dark academia genre, where even just seeing this on the shelf, it's demanding certain things of me. First, knowing that Middlegame is an allusion to chess. Secondly, seeing that the hand on the cover is a hand of glory. It almost feels like it's catering towards a specific group of people who want to feel smart, but then also is very much excluding groups of people who have not been exposed to that. And it feels like it's almost like an inside joke where the magic system is so poorly explained that you have to fill in a lot of the gaps with your own knowledge, and if you don't have that, then it's a little bit exclusionary. It's a really interesting concept, and what Seanan McGuire was trying to do is great, but the execution was just not there. You have a book that feels elitist and snooty and isn't that captivating. I think if you just look at it from far away and you're just like reading because you want to have like a fun story, that's fine. But the moment that you start thinking about the magic system, holes start appearing everywhere, and it becomes really frustrating to read. Then onto old favorites that just did not live up to the hype. First, there's the Selection series. You can hear me rant more about this in my mid-year book freakout tag, but this was just such a huge disappointment for me. I went in thinking I was gonna get a fun romance, and I got a horrible friends to lovers trope. I got like a weird guerrilla warfare rebels subplot that made no sense. And mostly it's set in a dystopian world that's built upon the foundations of a horrible caste system that makes no sense. And every attempt of the author to bring stakes into this world is so frustrating. And this on top of the fact that it's just like every other one of your I'm not like other girls YA books means this is a recipe for Svenja hates it. There was nothing redeeming about this except the fact that I felt like my brain had been turned off. And then the moment that I turned it back on again and used my one remaining brain cell to think critically about this, I was livid. Is this the kind of thing that I think teenage girls should be reading? No. Do I think that there's a place for YA romance in the teenage girls bookshelf? Yes. But executed like this, it's sending messages about femininity that are damaging and is also like not that interesting. Then we have the Three Dark Crowns series, which was another series that was hyped to me so hard. And I was really excited to get into it. The premise of Three Dark Crowns, you have this magical kingdom that's ruled by a queen, and the queen always has triplets. And the next queen is decided when these triplets come of age, they have a competition where they have to kill each other. And the one triplet that remains is victorious. And the structure of this elongated magical competition of them using their powers to defeat each other and kill each other and eventually become a queen was something that was intriguing to me, and I was excited about this plot. I felt like there was a good structure to it. And then the queens were just boring. I spent, 3 books with them just talking about like how like they're like, oh, I don't want to kill my sisters, but also like I don't want to die.
Help me, help me, help me, help me. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
And being like, oh, I'm like such a good person. And them just being painted as like these like goody two-shoes girls who are like so nice and kind and like don't want to play into the game. But like the game was interesting and they're boring. So all of the like introspection that I got of them, I was like absolutely not here for. And then, spoiler alert, I think in book 2, one of the girls like falls down this deep chasm and comes out possessed by the spirits of the queens that had died in the past. I don't know, some creepy stuff. She then becomes by far the most compelling queen. She's the one that has the most interesting motives. She has mystery surrounding her. She's manipulating people. She's doing interesting things, but she's painted as the villain because obviously she's the villain because you have these goody two-shoes girls running around being like, no, but I don't want to play the game, and like we have to kill her and we'll save each other and we'll run away and we'll tear down the system. But like I didn't want them to. I wanted the interesting girl to win. And then by the time that it became clear that the rest of the books were just going to be them hunting down the possessed girl, I was like, I'm out. Like, you're getting rid of the only interesting part of this book. You finally did something that was of note, and now you're getting rid of it, and I rage quit the series. I really thought that it was going to be something like fun and lighthearted that I was going to be able to get into, but it ended up just making me mad. And then lastly is my most recent read, which is Shatter Me, which I thought was going to be great. I thought I was going to have some like lighthearted romance vibes. Boy, was I wrong. I didn't even realize that it was dystopian, and that's on me for not reading the description. And then I was bored. Basically, you follow this girl who has what she thinks is a curse. When other people touch her skin, they get hurt, and it's like tortured. She can kill people just by touching them. Fine. Later in the book, it's revealed that she can also like kick down concrete walls and like punch through steel. Not that any of that is explained. And then at the very end, you find out that there's this whole clan of superheroes. And I'm like, you know what would be really great? If you explained your magic system. If there was any kind of like rules, like I understand that this is supposed to be a soft magic system. However, in a soft magic system, the magic should not be the reason that the plot moves forward. The magic then has to take a backdrop and becomes an atmospheric thing. If you are going to use the magic system to move your plot forward, it has to be explained thoroughly enough so that the reader can guess that it's gonna happen, can put the puzzle pieces together, and when it happens can go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Instead of the character whipping out a new magical ability at the climax of the book to save everyone. Because it's sloppy writing, it's poor plot progression, and it tears down the integrity of your world because suddenly we're in a place where anything is possible. Because if suddenly you can just whip out new magical powers when it matters most for the character, everything else in the plot becomes irrelevant. Because there's no way for the readers to know what's possible and what's not, and the suspension of disbelief, that trust that you've built with your reader, is completely smashed. And so I was really like aggravated with this book from like a fantasy craft perspective, but also from an enjoyment perspective. The romance was garbage. It made me feel uncomfortable. You can see my full like reactions to it in the reading vlog that I did. This just rubbed me the wrong way. Whew. All right, there we go. Those are the most hyped books that I've read that really pissed me off. Hopefully you haven't read any of these books, but if you made it all the way to the end, comment down below the most recent book that you read that you hated, and we can revel in our dislike for bad books together. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, it's been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next time.